The future of work and leadership always starts with us. Welcome to the Dr. Ginny Show. Let's dive in. Emily, welcome to the Dr. Ginny Show. I am so excited to have you here today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So Emily Coleman is the CEO of HAI Analytics, which is a predictive modeling solutions company. And I'm excited to meet with Emily because she and I have been chatting offline about what is the value of predictive analytics for any organization. And she's going to tell us, of course, her background, her journey getting to where she is right now. And we want to leave all of you in our audience, whether you are a company or a senior leader at an organization who is considering the use of predictive analytics to do so many things around talent development, or you are an individual, we have something for you today. So welcome to the Dr. Ginny Show. And let's get started. Emily, let's dive right in. And we also have a surprise. I just want to mention that we did some research and found that there were 11 predictive factors of retention and employee engagement. And out of those 11 factors, 9 of them were influenced and supported through talent development. So that is not going to get lost on us as we have this brief conversation. Emily, tell us about you. Tell us about what brought you here as a CEO of HAI Analytics so we can all relate to your journey.
Sure. So I have a PhD in psychology and statistics. I did that just because those are two areas that really interest me. When I finished that, I didn't want to go into academia, so I was looking for a way to apply the statistical knowledge and skills that I had built. So I started working at Syracuse University. I didn't know what enrollment management was. I didn't know that they did predictive modeling, but they knew that they did and they wanted someone there to do it. So they hired me first to look at graduate student retention and build models around that. I didn't really have any expectations for my career, whether I would sort of stay in this field. But I loved it. I loved the fact that I still was at an institution, but it was more sort of the applied work that I was doing. So I stayed there for 12 years. I eventually was the assistant VP of enrollment management there. And then I went to work at another higher ed consulting company doing similar things to what my company does, but in a different way. My colleague, who I co-founded HAI with, we felt like there was a hole in the marketplace for for us to kind of bloom, where we could offer an approach to analytics that's different than what's being offered out there. So we started HAI, we're both women, so we also were very proud of the fact that we were sort of doing this in an analytical field, two women, and we're seven years in now, so it's going really well. Yeah, so it's been great. It's been fun.
I know the journey for entrepreneurs is not an easy one,
Yeah,
right? I've been doing it now for 8 and it's a roller coaster
it
ride, right, Emily?
absolutely is. Yes.
So, Emily, I know you mentioned higher ed organizations, and I know that most of our audience are in corporate America running companies and businesses. And when we were talking about retention, engagement, and predictive analytics, I thought it would be valuable for us to have a conversation around what is the value of using predictive analytics. And you and I had a brief touch point on how valuable it could be once we really look at the company's data in predicting retention, engagement, and the value of talent development. So as it relates to that, when you think about your company, what are some of the top priorities right now for your organization as you work with your clients?
Our top priorities are to continue to help our clients meet their goals while at the same time serving their students as best they can. In my field, we talk a lot about the cost of education because it has grown so astronomically over the past 30 years. And so we talk about, how do we use financial aid strategically to help not just get students in the door, but help them stay. Universities, just like companies, make a big investment in every student that they enroll. So, they really need to be thinking about how to keep them there, how to keep them happy. They also are future alums and future donors and promoters of the institutions. We're trying to look at sort of the whole life cycle and figure out what what does an individual institution need to do to help their students succeed as best they can? And that sort of applies to companies as well, or to any business.
It does. I know organizations are making quite the investment once we hire talent and then we train them. They gain the institutional knowledge, they're finally fully productive, and then they leave, right? So that is disheartening because we've invested so much time, sweat, effort, peers. As an organization and as a coach and someone who consults with companies to help them develop their talent, I know there is so much value in identifying what would be the factors that help employees stay and not only stay, but be engaged in their work. To that end, what are some misconceptions that people have about analytics, about using data to predict behavior?
There are two common misconceptions that are sort of the opposite extremes of each other. So one of the things that we don't face as much now, but certainly have in the past, is people being resistant to having a predictive model tell them sort of what they believe they already know. And when we work with our partners, we do talk about the fact that it's a mixture of our expertise and our analytics with their expertise. It certainly, one doesn't replace the other. And most people, especially now, can sort of see that. But there is some resistance to have someone come in and use data or analytics or statistical model to, inform how they should be changing what they do. So there's kind of a resistance of like, I don't want any of it. But then we also see at the other end of the spectrum, especially now when there are really sophisticated AI models, students are coming out of college with these incredible data analytics skills and they can build these very complex models. But sometimes there is a belief that you don't have to, because the models are so sophisticated, we don't have to think about what we're putting in or what's coming out of them. Just get as much data as you can, dump it in there, and then the model will tell you what are the factors that matter. And we've seen all sorts of cases of how this can introduce bias, and we really, HAI stands for human and artificial intelligence, because we know from our experience and we believe that you need both the human element and the sophisticated methodologies.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you address that resistance?
You just sort of have to persevere. And being in consulting, we face it a bit less because people aren't hiring us if they don't want to have the research done. So I don't face it as much as perhaps I once did. But I think you need allies. You can't be the only person going into an organization and saying, I'm going to conduct these analyses and that's going to tell us all what to do. And if no one else is in support of that, there's just no way that it's going to succeed. So I think you try to build relationships, you try to build allies, and also help people see we're not trying to replace anyone or anything. We're just adding the way kind of autopilot adds to, it hasn't replaced pilots, but it has made flying safer. And that's really what we're trying to do with analytics as well.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know as a leader, our job is to ensure that we share the vision of what we're trying to do and accomplish, and then bring you in as the expert to help us get there versus, what are these people doing here and what are they doing with our data?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that the piece where you talk about the marriage or the integration between humans and AI, because ultimately it is us, the human, who can begin to make sense of, based on what we know, how should the model look?
Yeah.
In other words, the model's not going to model itself.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's so powerful. AI, I've been using it so much to do so much of my work and the research that I do for my books, etc. And it's incredible when you just give it all this data and say, make sense of it.
Yeah.
It will. It will say, okay, based on what you gave me, this is what I think would be, illogical. But then I, as an author, may say, wait, no, that's not what I want to talk about.
Right.
And I want to talk about it in this order.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something earlier about the order in which some of the factors and the interconnection between the factors is meaningful as it relates to predictive analytics. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And in the context of businesses, who are trying to determine what are the factors that indeed impact their retention and engagement. What can you tell us about that and how to think about
Yeah, so we'll hear someone recite an objective fact. So for a business, let's say it's that the further someone lives from the office, the less likely they are to retain. So we can sort of know that that's a fact, but not know why that is. And it may be an interaction with other variables. So is it the fact that they don't like to spend the time in the car? Is it the price of gas? Is it, who knows what, the traffic? It could be a lot of different things influencing that. And so
the projects they're working on?
Right. Yes, many things. So a statistical model allows us to kind of put in the different, possibilities, all of the different variables and tease apart which is really driving the effect and which looks like it's more a spurious correlation that is just sort of happening because of this relationship with other variables.
Yes, I'm having right now literally PTSD because I remember working on my PhD where I was looking at mergers and acquisitions and looking at the variables that influence a successful IT merger integration. And I remember doing precisely that. All my analysis looking to see which variables were like primary
Yeah.
drivers and which one were just kind of like on the side. They don't have much of a role, but they do play some type of role.
Right. And it's so important to know the difference because for a company, in order to know how to best address employee attrition, you really need to know, what are the factors that we need, do we need to support carpooling? Do we need,
Mm.
there's just so many different things they could do depending on what the driver is of the effect.
Now, tell me what you shared with the audience, what you shared with me before about looking at your actual data and the value and the power of, yeah, you can use general models, but when you actually use your data, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, there's research out there about the factors that tend to be predictive of retention at companies. And those are sort of generalizations that for many companies will be true, some may not. But even beyond those, there will be a lot of individual factors within a company that influence things like employee satisfaction or employee retention. So using those more general models as kind of a starting point and adding to those with company, individual statistics is really important. You don't just want to know what makes an employee stay at a job in general. You want to know what makes them stay at my company or what makes them happy or successful or, whatever the factor is that you're looking at. And those kind of smaller variables can have a big impact and can vary quite a bit from one institution to another.
So, what are some growth opportunities that you see today?
For companies in terms of data, I think there's so much more that companies could do with data. And we are seeing companies move in that direction. They need to be systematically recording data. So that is something that, never used to happen before computers. Now, most companies have some sort of database on their employees. But I think that they could use those data to really enhance their efforts at increasing employee satisfaction and really their can be a belief that company goals and employee goals go against each other, but they don't. I mean, so often you need to have happy, successful employees in order to have a successful company. So it is really important for companies to be figuring out how they can use their data to predict their individual situation.
Yeah, so let's get into these factors that we talked about a little bit. And there were, as I mentioned, 11 of them. And out of the 11, there's only two that talent development doesn't support. And they're pretty obvious. Number one is compensation and benefits. You can't do anything about that, right? As a coach and as a consultant. And the other one is remote and hybrid work flexibility. That is one of the factors that showed were predictive as it relates to talent loyalty to their work. But there were a bunch of them that are predictive, which can be influenced easily by talent development, such as career growth and development is one of the factors. Leadership and manager effectiveness. You can become a more effective leader when you have gone through a talent development exercise and are engaged regularly, consistently in talent development. Also, employee engagement and job satisfaction, which is what you just mentioned. And do something about that. The workplace culture and psychological safety can also be enhanced when we have our talent engaging and our managers specifically in talent development. And there is a report by Gallup, the most recent global state of the workforce report, that shows that 70% of engagement is attributed to managers. That was startling for me. That means that if you have a disengaged manager, you have a very high likelihood that the team that manager is leading will also be disengaged. Wow, this is impactful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a few of the other factors, Emily, that I've learned through the research was workload, stress, and burnout. This is something we can also have a say in that will be a positive outcome. Recognition and appreciation. I think that engaging in talent development itself is a way to recognize and appreciate your employees, especially the high performing, high achieving ones and the rising stars that we want to retain. And the last three are alignment with company purpose and values. When people feel aligned, before you were mentioning how we tend to think that individual goals and company goals aren't necessarily meshing. When we take the effort and are intentional about connecting our company goal to the individual goals and understanding what those are, it makes a huge difference. And development definitely helps with that. And the last two are team dynamics and peer relationships and performance, feedback, and promotions. Those are all impacted by talent development. So as we wrap up, Emily, what would be the number one piece of advice that you would give organizations listening to us today?
I would advise them to figure out what data they have on employees, figure out ways that they could collect more. The factors that you just listed, and you mentioned compensation, we all know that that has some influence on job satisfaction, but as you said, so often, a company can't do anything about that. They're sort of paying people what they can. So those other factors really can make up for that. Companies need to be aware of that and understand that it isn't just paying people more that is going to make them happy. It's all of these other things. So, I think leadership development at companies is essential. Even large companies, giving every person who works there a feeling of ownership over the success of the company is really, really important. And so if companies aren't already doing that and they can use data to guide how they would do that, then I think, that can be a game changer for a lot of companies.
If you had no limitations, Emily, no limitations of time, budget, resources, what initiatives would you launch right now?
For me personally, because I work in the higher ed space, I work with a lot of individual institutions and look at the impact their financial aid dollars have on enrollment and retention. But there's sort of this overarching problem that really needs to be addressed, and that is this kind of high price, high discount model that colleges have good reasons come to adapt. And we really need to sort of walk back from that. It'll take an enormous amount of research to figure out how schools can do that. It isn't easy to sort of lower your price and still, hit your bottom line. But if I had unlimited resources, I would put together a team of economists, psychologists, people with institutional backgrounds to figure out some solutions to this big problem.
It is a big problem. Tell me about it. My son is going to college in September.
My daughter is too.
We're in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
Emily, as we wrap up, what is the best piece of advice that you've received that you want to impart on our listeners today?
I think the best piece of advice I've received is learn how to delegate. And that was something that was very, very difficult for me early in my career. I think it is for a lot of people. It's taken a lot of years to get to a place where I'm comfortable doing that. And I think it benefits me because I'm not trying to do everything myself, but also it benefits an employee because they feel like they're being given some responsibility. So that was a tough lesson for me to learn, but definitely one that I learned over time and the best advice that I received early on.
I know that is a toughie.
Yeah.
I coach clients and myself. It's, I think, one of the toughest things to transcend going from an individual contributor to a leader is delegation because
Yes.
we feel so much ownership
Yeah.
and we want to get it right, which is a little bit of a control enthusiast element in there, right?
Yep. Yep. And my father taught me if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Do it
And
yourself, which
but you can't
you
always do that in
can, you
business.
can.
So
It's so great that you brought that in. Beliefs drive our behaviors. And I know that you studied behavior psychology, you mentioned. Our beliefs drive our behaviors. So, as an organization, we have to pay attention to what are the beliefs our leaders currently carry around, and even the clients that you go to work with, because those beliefs are going to drive the decisions they're making. And if we're trying to create a future ready talent workforce, we need to pay attention to the beliefs that could be helping that cause or that could be hindering our growth,
yeah.
while honoring whoever has the belief because
Yes.
they're there for a reason.
Right.
Those beliefs are there for a reason. So lastly, Emily, companies listening to us, senior leaders listening, if they want to reach out to HAI Analytics to continue this conversation offline with you, how can they best reach you?
I would welcome people to send me an email at ecoleman@haianalytics.com. They can go to our website. They can submit a form there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so if people want to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm happy to have that happen as well.
And I think on LinkedIn, you are Emily Chase Coleman. Yeah, so we're going to include your contact in our show notes. Emily, thank you so much for sharing your gift of predictive analytics with us. I know that this is a brief conversation. I'm grateful that our listeners had a chance to hear from you and that we had this short moment together. And I look forward to success in the future for HAI Analytics and for organizations who reach out to you, that you're able to support them in any way you can.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
My pleasure, Emily. I'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Dr. Ginny Show. And we can't wait for the next episode. See you soon. If you enjoyed today's content, I appreciate your review so others can find us, and share it with your friends. And to stay in touch, join our community to receive valuable strategies and expert advice at drginnybaro.com. See you soon.